Please welcome to the stage musician, actor, advocate, and author Demi Lovato in conversation with NBC News anchor and correspondent Savannah Sellers.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for this conversation. I'm so excited to have this conversation, probably just excited as you are to listen to it. The fact that that's my picture and that's your picture, Demi, I'm like, what is going on here? This is awesome to be here. Thank you for doing this with us. Obviously, Demi needs no introduction in terms of being the global superstar that she is, but I just think to get to have this conversation with you about mental health, knowing how open you have been, which we're gonna get into, but also just the work that you do aside from that, partnerships with, to focus on eating disorders, which is also something that you have been very, very open about as well. It's Active Minds, an organization that works to equip young people with the tools to help other young people, which I think is one of the most important steps in this conversation that we'll also get into in part 2 of this in a moment. But Demi, I'd love to start with you in talking about what is sort of the session right now that we're in. It's under the banner of growing up online. And I think you are that personified. It's not just having social media at your fingertips, but it's being the subject of so much of what is on social media. And if you could just, you know, you've talked about it in the past, but just in this room right now, talk through really what that has meant to you and the impact that it's had to literally grow up online in front of people.
Well, first of all, thank you for saying all of that. That was a really sweet introduction.
Absolutely.
Secondly, growing up with social media has kind of always been a part of my life. Growing up when I was around, I think it was 10, 11 years old, I grew up with AOL Instant Messenger. And then there was a website called Zanga. And then there was a website called MySpace. And then there was a website called Twitter, which is still around today. And growing up with Twitter and all these social media apps, well, I guess they weren't apps at the time, right. But growing up with all this social media was really impactful on my mental health and it has made it difficult to kind of decipher, you know, what's reality and what's not.
Absolutely. And then we talked before this in conversation, you just talking about having to make decisions like not reading the comments or restricting them and that type of thing. What's navigating that like on the level that you've had to?
The level that I've had to navigate social media on has been challenging. You know, when I first started out on social media and in the public eye, I remember it was 2008 or 2009 when Twitter came around. And that was when I first started becoming known in the spotlight. And I would see hateful things, you know, people sitting behind a computer screen can say anything without repercussions and without actually acknowledging or even understanding how it affects the other person that's reading the comments that they're writing them towards. And it got to a point where I realized I can't read anything because if I read positive comments, it feeds my ego. And if I read negative comments, it damages my ego. And ultimately, I don't want to navigate out of ego at all. So I just decided that I wasn't going to read them. And now when I post a picture on Instagram, I can see the first few comments, they're from friends. But as soon as I see one that I don't recognize from a stranger, I stop reading because I don't want to see it. I don't want to have that dopamine hit of validation from a stranger, and I don't want to also have the negative effect that would happen to me if I read something hateful.
Absolutely. It makes me think, you said something that really stuck with me that I heard you say once in terms of boundaries. And we'll talk a little bit in a moment about things that you've been very open about and struggled with in front of people. One of the things that you said is, I don't want to be the poster child for recovery. I'm not going to take that on. That is setting a serious boundary. How tough is that? But also, how important has that been to getting to the place that you're in now?
Getting to the place that I'm in now, I had to have that period of time where I had to set that boundary with the world and say, I'm not going to be the poster child for recovery. Now I'm okay with speaking about mental health because I don't take it on like I used to. I used to take that on and it was a part of my identity. And now I understand that it's just a part of my life and it's not who I am, but it's how I navigate through this world, and if I can help others through speaking about it, then I'm going to. But I don't let the pressure get to me like it used to.
Absolutely. And when it comes to recovery, there have been a lot of things that you have been very, very open about. Like I mentioned, you have a relationship, you are partner to the National Alliance on Eating Disorders. You've also been open about your own struggles in that regard. We talked about what social media is doing to young people in this regard. There's been 104%, I think is the stat, spike in eating disorders from 2018 to 2022. What would it be like for you, do you think, if when you first started struggling with that, you had the internet the way we do at our fingertips now? And how damaging do you think it is?
I think it's so damaging. I think that we live in a world of editing and Facetune and all these things that can change the way that we look. Like I said, it's hard to decipher what's reality and what's not. When you're looking at images of people with perfect bodies and you know, the illusion of perfection, you start to look at yourself and you start to pick yourself apart. And it's hard to grow up in a world where that's right in front of your face and at your fingertips at all times. It's terrifying and very scary to think of what people are growing up with. I did grow up with, like I said, I grew up with Zanga and MySpace and images of people that were, who were in this public eye. The editing wasn't there, but we lived in a world where body image was heavily focused on. You know, I grew up in a period of time where young Hollywood was very, very, very thin, and that was the look. And I think that had a really negative impact on my on my mental health, which I think fed into my eating disorder. And I think that now it's even worse because we're able to edit pictures at the drop of a dime.
Yeah.
You know, it's so damaging. But I think that if you stick true to yourself and you set those boundaries and you focus, you know, you don't click on those images that are on your Explore page on Instagram, so that it doesn't feed into your algorithm, you can kind of set those boundaries with yourself. And hopefully talking about it, raising awareness that's not reality will hopefully speak to somebody and change their perspective.
What's interesting to me to hear you talk about this is talking about it both as a consumer of that yourself, like just seeing images on Instagram, but then also, of course, being a celebrity, which is different than all of us in this room, what you have to navigate in terms of the choices and the images of you that are shown to other people that could be experiencing those same feelings. How is it to navigate what you decide to post, what you're comfortable with that feels real to you, because I know that's important to you, but that keeps you in a good headspace?
What keeps me in a good headspace, and just posting what feels real to me, is posting things that I love, you know, whether it's my boyfriend or my dogs or images from concerts. And like I said, staying true to myself. I think that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to ask you a little bit about one of the things I really appreciated when we had a conversation before this was that you said, I'm an open book, and there are so many things that you have been that way about. Of course, one of the things that you have been very open about was the overdose that you experienced and the near-death experience that was, ultimately revealing the multiple strokes, the heart attack that you had that came along with that. That level of transparency is the opposite of what we see a lot of times on social media. We've talked about how it's just this highlight reel. Was that a hard decision to make, to be that open?
It wasn't a hard decision for me because I've always been an open book. The very first time that I went to treatment was when I was 18, and I went for my eating disorder, and I went for self-harm and emotional issues. And when I came out of that experience, I was faced with the decision of either keep your mouth shut and not say anything and hope it goes away, or share your experience, strength, and hope with another person in hopes that it affects them in a positive way. And you can hopefully become an inspiration to somebody that might be struggling. And I decided to go with that route because I wanted to help others. And I wanted people to know, because I wish that I had had somebody when I was 13 years old and having an eating disorder and starving myself. I wanted somebody in the public eye to say that hey, this is what I've gone through, and you don't have to choose that route. It's okay if you're struggling. It's okay to ask for help. And so I decided to speak out. And so whenever I went through what I did later in life, and I'm choosing my words very carefully because we live in a world where any soundbite that I have can turn into a headline.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when I went through what I did later in life, I realized that honesty and transparency was also the answer, because now I was faced with another obstacle, a different obstacle, but one that was still very important. And I needed to speak my truth because there were so many narratives that were out there that weren't true. I wanted to speak my truth and to be transparent, but I also wanted to help others as well.
And you went so far as to make the decision to be transparent about things that you could have kept secret. It wasn't the headline the next day. It wasn't what fed into the media cycle. It was then later revealing that a few weeks later, you struggled again. You had a relapse. Was choosing to tell things that had been private previously hard, or was it important to you that fans, anybody who, like you said, is 13 years old looking up to you, knows everything?
I think that it's not important that everyone knows everything about my life. That's not something that's very important to me. But what is important is that if I'm struggling, that I'm transparent with people so that they can understand that that what you see isn't always what is real. When I'm posting on social media, or when I was posting on social media, I was painting a picture of a beautiful, happy life, but there were times where I was struggling. And that's not to say that today I don't have bad days. Everyone has bad days, and sometimes I struggle too. But I wanted to keep that honesty and transparency with people, because the vulnerability that we don't see on social media is, it's sad that you don't see the reality of what's going on in people's lives. And so I wanted to keep that transparency with my fans and tell them, hey, this is the journey I'm on. And I also had set a precedent. I'd also set, I had said I wanted to be California sober, and that didn't work for me. And I wanted to make people aware that, hey, I said this and I take it back, because it's my responsibility to show people that even though I had made these choices, they didn't work out for me, and they're not going to work for everyone either.
Have you met those 13-year-olds who needed you? What's that like?
Yes, I've met people that have said, I'm so grateful that you've shared your story with people. I'm so grateful that you have said that you have struggled and have shared your story, because it's helped me. And knowing that I've been an inspiration to people has helped me so much in my dark times. It's helped me get through my own struggles, but it's also been very rewarding and very impactful to me to be able to talk to my fans firsthand and hear their stories as well has been really inspirational to me.
Oh, I bet. And in the work that you do with some of those organizations that I mentioned and several others, how much of a difference does it make when you get to make those one-on-one connections? We've talked about, through both Active Minds and the National Alliance on Eating Disorders, you meet people who are going through this. What is that like, the one-on-one, especially when you have millions of people who watch you, who feel that they know you, to actually make that connection?
Making a connection with people that I have influenced is always really impactful and inspirational to me. I've heard so many stories and seen so many people who have raised posters in the audience that have said, "You've saved my life," or "Thank you for helping me." And seeing that makes every hard time that I've gone through make it worth it.
Oh, I bet. Let's talk about some of the stuff that has helped you get here. We talked about some of the ways that you protect what you let in, that you know your boundaries, as we've discussed on this panel, but some of the coping mechanisms that you use now.
Some of the coping mechanisms that I use now, I found something that I deal with now is anxiety. I've dealt with depression, I've dealt with addiction, I've kind of have a checklist and I've just kind of knocked them all off. And now what I realize that I face with is anxiety. And what helps me with anxiety is exercise, is just breaking a sweat and not exercising for any certain goal other than to move my body and break a sweat so that I can get out of those anxious feelings. That really helps me. Meditation really helps me, even though sometimes when I'm anxious, I really don't want to. But that really helps. And also talking to my treatment team. You know, that's something that has stayed very, very important and valuable to me over time, and something that I'll always do for the rest of my life because they know best. You know, I don't always have the answers, but they do.
Yeah. Even just you being able at this point in your life to say what you just said about the checklist, but you know what you've been through and you're on the other side. When you were in it, could you have imagined being here?
No. There have been times where I've dealt with depression where I have had suicidal ideations, and it's something that I've struggled with since I was very young, and it's something that I can still struggle with if I don't stay on top of it. But there have been times where I've struggled so deeply where I couldn't see the other side. I couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. And even, you know, there have been times recently where the anxiety has felt so big and scary that I think this is never going to end. But I realize that even though feelings can be big and scary and even sometimes debilitating, you can get through it and feelings pass. And that's something to keep in mind when you're going through it. And it doesn't always pass, you know, soon, but they do pass. And the only thing in life that's permanent is impermanence. So we have to understand the fluidity of emotions and realize that things will end up being okay if we take the steps to get the help that we need.
You use the same platforms that have caused destruction in the past for good now. What does it mean to you, especially with your fan base? And how do you use your platform for that good?
I use my platform for good by posting on social media. You know, I think it's 150 something million followers on Instagram, which is unfathomable for me. Like, I'm just like, who cares that much? You know, like, why are so many people following? But, you know, if they are following, I'm gonna put out good, positive things that I know are gonna help people. You know, I just posted on May 1st for Mental Health Awareness Month. I posted resources for people that are struggling and a little video that said, hey, if you're struggling, it's okay. You know, staying on top of that is really important to me.
Yeah, I have to say, just in having had the privilege now to be speaking with you about this a couple times, you are so, like, you are walking the walk, not just talking the talk. Like, you know, it's Mental Health Awareness Month. I know you have a plan of things you're gonna do on Mental Health Action Day that's coming up on the 18th. Is this as important a part of your life as the other things that we know you for, as your music, as these other parts of your career, being an advocate in this way?
I would say it's arguably even more important because music, yes, it can last forever, but careers don't. You know, life and legacy is what's important. Speaking your truth and sharing your experience with people is, I think, so much more valuable than putting out a song. Even though songs can help people through dark times as well. It's just, it puts things into perspective, especially as I've gotten older. I've realized, yes, I've had a great career and I'm very proud of it. But the things that I'm most proud of are the fans that share their stories with me and say, you've saved my life, or you've been an inspiration to me, or you've helped me get through a really dark time. And that to me is more important than any award that I could win.
How much of a creative outlet for you has your music been in terms of working through this?
Oh my gosh, my music is such an outlet for me. It's so valuable. My last album that I made, I started out in I started out fresh out of treatment, and I had all these ideas and so many things I wanted to say, and then I hit a rock bottom where I fell into a depression, and and I wrote a song called Happy Ending. And it was a song that was really emotional for me to write. And you can hear the disparity in my lyrics and my voice when I sing it. But having that outlet to write maybe not the most positive song in the world was very impactful to me and helped me get through that rough period.
Mm-hmm. We are almost out of time, which is very sad, but I will ask you something that I hope gives you the opportunity to say something to your fans, although they hear a lot from you, which I think is really cool on every platform. But what do you want the 13-year-old who's watching you now to know about if they're not okay, if they are struggling with what they're seeing on their social media feeds? What do you want them to know?
I want them to know that talking to people and asking for help is more than okay and is absolutely what you should do. Having these conversations with your friends, having these conversations with your parents, with anybody that you know, it just raises the awareness and puts it into your conscious mind that what you see is not reality all the time. And it's very important. It's also so important to realize that if you're struggling, it's okay to ask for help. I wish that I had asked for help sooner, but everything works out the way that it should, or the way that it's supposed to, and I'm glad that I asked for help when I did.
The last thing is, I've heard that you've said recently that you are really happy, like you are in a great place, and you even joked and said, I guess my next album is going to be sappy love songs. Just tell us a little bit about where you're at now in your life.
Yeah, where I'm at now, you know, I don't want to paint the facade that everything is totally perfect and fine. But I am in a really good place, and it has been kind of challenging to write a happy rock album. It's like, how do you write a happy rock album? But I'm doing it, and you know, I've done the work, and I continue to do the work, and that's what's really important to me. But I have bad days. I had a bad day on Sunday, you know, I had anxiety. There's a lot in this world that keeps me up at night. And, but I took the steps that I needed to in order to feel better. I talked to my treatment team. My boyfriend held me, and I got through it. And it was something that was very valuable to me, because I realized that even to this day, no matter how happy I might feel and seem, I'm human, and it's okay to still struggle even when you're in a great place.
What a great message. Demi, thank you so much. Thank you for doing this conversation with us. We really appreciate it.